Welcome to the JCPS Science New Teacher Orientation. This is your K-12 Science Support Team. Brittany Thompson is the Academic Specialist for K-12 Science, and Stacy Hubbard is the K-12 Science Instructional Lead. In this presentation, we'll talk about science instruction, science standards, and some curriculum and resources. For science instructions, let's start to talk about how do students learn science. So take a moment to consider, how did you learn about science in school? So let's think about, how do we learn? So over the years, there's been many studies that have talked about and have studied how do we learn, and we've figured out that learners actively construct their knowledge. They're not passive, they're actively constructing their knowledge. So to become experts, expertise takes more than just knowing a lot of facts and memorizing a lot of information. We've also figured out that worksheets, textbooks, and lectures alone aren't effective. Students have to have not just a bunch of random knowledge facts, but they have to have a lot of skills to support that learning to make it more meaningful to them. So there was a new vision of science education that actually helped form our next generation science standards, our NGSS. So there was this vision of a framework for K-12 science education, and these were some of the things, I'll let you read through it on the screen, but the things on the left is what was more traditional science education, and so we were going to move away from those things on the left, and with NGSS, education was going to involve more of the things on the right. So see how that maybe compares again with the way you've learned. And here's some more information on that. Again, this was formed by the National Research Council in 2015 that then set the stage for the next generation science standards. Here are 5 innovations for teachings, again, with the NGSS. So you can take a moment, again, you can pause the video at any time to kind of look through any of the information you'd like to see. Again, think about how this is similar or different from how you learned science in the past. So now let's talk about science standards. What are science students expected to know and be able to do? So how are our standards structured? First of all, our standards are called performance expectations, or we'll say PEs. The first part is science and engineering practices, or what we call SEPs. They're always in blue. The second part of our standard is the disciplinary core idea, or the DCI. That's always in orange. And then there's a third part called the cross-cutting concept, called the CCC. So our performance expectation, our standard, has 3 integral parts that work together to make that standard. So what are the disciplinary core ideas? That is what students know. There are 4 domains, as you can see here, and they are shortened by their acronyms on the right. And you will see now that those disciplinary core ideas are subdivided into certain numbers. So like, for example, physical science will be PS, but it might have PS1, matter and interactions, and so on and so forth. And then those are subdivided into component ideas. So PS1, for example, so you have physical science, PS1, will be subdivided into our component ideas like PS1.A, PS1.B, and that's what you will see under standards as those component ideas. So what are the science and engineering practices? Those are what students do. There are 8 of them listed on the screen. So what does the students do just like scientists do in everyday world? What are the cross-cutting concepts? Those are how students think. So this is how scientists think, no matter if they're doing any kind of science, if they're doing physical science, if they're doing earth science, life science, these are the way that scientists think. So our DCIs that we talked about that were in orange, those are our traditional science ideas, but they're going a lot deeper than what we've done in the past. And now within our standards, we have the SCPs, what scientists do, intertwined with the CCCs, how students think. So all 3 parts have to work together. So how do the dimensions appear in the standard? So here we have MSLS 1.4. This is our standard up here. You can see what I've underlined in blue would be our science and engineering practice, and that would be engaging in argument from evidence. And the DCI is now in orange. And then you will see the word effect, which is also in orange, but it's also in green because that is our cross-cutting concept, cause and effect. So can you identify the 3 dimensions of this standard? So if you look here, which science and engineering practice do you see? Hopefully you saw developing and using a model as our science and engineering practice, and the cross-cutting concept, you can see the word patterns is here, which is number 1 in the cross-cutting concept. So we have the science and engineering practice of 2 developing models, and we have the cross-cutting concept of 1 patterns. All right, so how do we read a standards page? The very top is what we call a title and code of arrangement. So for example, this is a 3rd grade LS4 arrangement, biological evolution, unity and diversity. Those parts up at the top are what we call accessible components. That's what's going to be assessed in state testing. The next part down here is the foundations box for the 3 strands that we just kind of went over of the blue in science and engineering practice, the disciplinary core idea, and the cross-cutting concept, a little more specific of what elements are in each of those standards. And then finally, connections boxes that we'll talk about. So in this performance expectation code and description, what students should be able to do and master by the standard. Okay, so if you look at this box closer, you're going to see something called a clarification statement, which just means this is how far you should go within the standard. You will also see assessment boundaries in many of the standards, which just means this is how far the assessment and state testing will go, what it will and will not assess. And the 3 foundational boxes, again, you will see the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. If you look through, for example, science and engineering practices, the first one here is analyzing, interpreting data. You will see, since there was multiple standards listed at the top, it will tell you which standard is actually analyzing, interpreting data, and which element of analyzing, interpreting data is being addressed in this standard. The connection boxes, again, you have connections to other DCIs in the same grade. You have DCIs across grade levels. So maybe if this is a 3rd grade standard, then it would be something from 4th or 5th that might actually, in that same grade level band, connect. But then also at the bottom, you have common core state standard connections. So connections to ELA or literacy strands, and then standards, and also mathematics. So take a moment. This is PS1, PS11. Review the standards page for this PS1 that's on the screen, and see if you can answer these questions on the screen. So pause the video and see if you can find those things on there. If you need help, you can always go back in the video to review how you look at a standards page. The progression of DCIs across grade bands, this is just to show you that if you look to the left where it says PS1.A, structure and properties of matter, that DCI goes across all grade bands. It just increases in complexity. Same with SEPs. For example, this one is developing using models. You will see modeling across K-12 with different elements that just increase in complexity. And then same with CCCs. So think about it. How might being aware of the progressive nature of the NGSS be helpful when preparing for your instruction? JCPS Science has noted for enduring standards that you might hear about a lot in your schools that we recommend using the science and engineering practice and cross-cutting concepts, not the disciplinary core ideas, as your enduring standards, because those are the things that students, those skills and those ways of thinking are things students can take away that are enduring, even if they cannot remember a science an idea. They can use those skills to help figure something out. So here's your emphasis on sense making and science and engineering practices, and the emphasis on the following cross-cutting concepts. But remember, when you're focusing on these above SCPs and CCCs, they're all important. These are just the ones that we would say are the most enduring. You will need to be strategic about the grade level DCIs that you pair with them, because you want to make sure, again, that they are getting the science ideas as they are working through these CCCs and SCPs. So for grade level curriculum and resources, I wanted to give you a quick background of where we are with middle and high school. So in 2023-24 school year, there was a 50-50 committee, which is 50% JCTA teachers and 50% not, that was formed based on Senate Bill 1 curriculum recommendation, which Senate Bill 1 was saying that the superintendent could recommend a standard curriculum across a district. This committee, there was 2 committees formed, one for middle school and high school. In middle school, the committee selected Open Syed as their HQIR. In high school, the committee postponed because there was Algebra 1 and English was being implemented in 24-25. But in what we did instead is 12 teachers for 5 schools piloted high school Open Syed units in physics, chemistry, and biology, 2 units per content. Then in 2024-25 school year, middle school had year 1 of district-wide implementation of Open Syed. High school had about 18 teachers, or 10 schools pilot high school open SciEd units in physics, chemistry, and biology, about 2 to 4 units per content depending on schools. And then this year, middle school is year 2 of district-wide implementation of open SciEd, and then high school has 9 schools, but is a lot more teachers involved here because we're piloting across the entire PLCs and sometimes entire schools, and they're piloting 3 units for each content in physics, chemistry, and bio. So I'm going to give you a moment here. We're going to look at the JCPS Science website, so you can use a QR code, or I'm going to show you some things here in the bit.ly, but just for your future reference of how do you get to it. That is, continue to destination. So I want to show you a couple things on our website. There are lots of things across the top. You can find out more about the standards like I was just talking about. There are other things, curriculum, where we're going to go for most of the resources. There are some other instruction. There's some KSA information. There's some professional learning. The materials that we provide, and some additional resources. For this video, I'm going to talk about curriculum as your focus, because that is where you're going to get your resources for your lessons. If you are 6-8, you can arrow down there. You can pick your grade. For example, I'll just pick 6th grade. And you will see unit pages for every unit. There is lots of resources. And you'll also see some other just grade level specific pages or grade band specific pages. For your units in middle school, you will see that there is lots of, every unit page looks exactly the same. There's a unit resources folder and lots of great things to help you with the standardized open SciEd curriculum, such as an overview of the unit customization overviews, whatnot, and notebooks. If you're in high school, again, you will have your own specific pages you can get on. Like I'll do physics. There is a curriculum framework that you may that you can click on to get some information on the frameworks of how you could do your content within your framework. But there's also some specific instructional units that you can click on and get some ideas for your instructional units, your assessments, maybe some intervention resources, additional physics resources, the evidence statements for courses, for the standards that we just talked about. Evidence statements just give you a little bit more information of what's included in that could be showing evidence that you are meeting that standard. So there are pages again for each content that I highly recommend that you visit and kind of work through the different units and see what, for high school, since it is not a mandated curriculum, you can kind of choose through there some of the suggested units and lessons. Again, if you need any more information for that, you can contact Brittany or Stacy. For professional development schedule, I just wanted to show you this, that this is for what we're calling our Educators Exchange for middle school, where you can get 2-hour PD on different types of help and support for units and for implementing instruction. And then high school Beyond the Bell is the name for theirs, and this is their schedule, so that if you want to hold any of these on your calendar, more information is supplied to department chairs and principals about those specific sessions. So I just wanted to say, I hope you have a fantastic school year. Thank you for all you are doing.